Welcome to my garden planning session 2021. Now you might be thinking that, okay, here's the day that I sit down and I plan out my garden for 2021. Well, that's really not what happens. For me, I start planning my 2021 garden back in 2020, even back in as early as June and July. I always keep a garden journal. This particular one started off new in 2013. And you can see I have a little schematic of my 24 by 24 foot raised bed garden. It changed over the years. I had different pathways. I moved my plants around. In this journal, I have lots of informative things. I have a little schedule here on compatible and combative plants. I don't always adhere to that, but it's something to look at and to think about. Every year I make notations on frost dates. My planting zone is 6 or 6A, which means that I probably have about 170 days of in my growing season, with the last frost, I should say, at about the end of April, and then the first frost in the fall about mid-October. So I have to keep those dates in mind, that I don't really want to plant anything, before the date or after the date, or the plant may not survive, because there's definitely guaranteed to be a frost somewhere around that. Although I don't stick particularly to them, especially the last frost date in the end of April. I kind of like to push it into May before I put more unfrost tolerant plants into my garden. But anyway, this journal helps me realize what's doing well in my garden and ideas that I have for the following year. For instance, one year I came across this setup, and this is a trellis that I made for my cucumber plants. And so I used generally this idea and started to grow more vertically in my gardens. I didn't purchase this one. I think this was probably from Gardener Supply or someplace like that. But I made something very similar, and I got my cucumbers up off the ground. And instead of having them grow and creep all over the ground and take up like 15 square feet of my precious garden space, now it can grow vertically in like about 5 square feet. So I can get a better yield, and then I can free up more space for other plants in my garden. Here it was a very dry June and July in this particular year. This was 2016. And I had to wet water, 3-4 times a week. So anyway, that explained to me why my yield in my garden wasn't that good that year, because the plants were off to a very poor start with lacking water and some of the nutrients. Anyway, so every year I make notations, and this goes usually, I try and take this out into the garden for a specific planning purpose during the preceding year, and to make notations on what's going on out there. Last year I made specific notations on my tomatoes and how they proceeded throughout the growing season. Back in 2019, here's a schematic of my garden. This is not meant for publication. Only for me and for my general knowledge, because I'm the only one that can really read this, because it's just kind of craziness here. Anyway, 2019 was a year where I decided to add additional garden space to my garden. and I added 4 more raised beds, and this was just to the west of my main garden, which is what I call that 24 by 24 foot raised bed. I always write what I put down in it and then how it worked out. These first beds didn't work out all that well because the soil I put in here was rather poor, and so in the successive years I realized like in 2020, I had to amend these beds with a lot more compost because the soil had been pretty poor when I put these in initially in 2019. So anyway, so then comes 2020. I got a little bit crazier and I put graph paper. And here is my new 4 raised beds, their second year. And I also put in 3 more raised beds. And those were just to the north of the large bed. Here is a schematic then of my large 24 by 24. And in this particular one, last year, I had a lot of tomatoes. I did a little bit of an experimentation on lots of different new varieties to see if there was anything that could replace what I had been planting for years and years. So I made a crazy little, another schematic, color-coded on all the different types. It also has peppers in here. If you looked at my videos from last summer, I talked about the Pepper Parkway, and that ran right down between two panels of tomatoes. Anyway, so I took pretty detailed notes on the different kinds of tomatoes and how they grew during the year, and which ones I've decided to keep and grow again in 2021. That will be in another video, but this one I'm just talking about garden planning. So this book is invaluable for me, this notebook and all these notes that I take. Back in 2020, I start a section that says 2021, and that gives me all sorts of information on what I want to, new plants I want to plant, old plants that I am not going to plant. I have a message to myself right here that says no cantaloupe and no watermelon because they take up too much space. Now, I did grow cantaloupe on a trellis. It didn't work out so well, and I put that right there because I thought that it was being crowded out and shaded out by my edamame, which were right next door to it. So if I have space, maybe I might. So this is not written in stone as to what I am going to do with 2021. This is only the beginning of the garden planning. One thing I did note after my harvest was coming in 2020 was that I had a prolific bean crop, and I put away many, many, many beans. So I've preserved them, and they will take me for sure right in through the summer. So I don't need to plant as many beans as I did last year. So that frees up some more space to either add some new variety or add a whole different vegetable in the area where I had beans. I know I did note here that I want to plant more yellow beans, so perhaps that will be an area that can take over from the green bean area. Yes, and back to talking about tomatoes. All right, I had a huge tomato crop. Everything did pretty well. There were a couple varieties that I've decided against growing again, but my regulars were very prolific, and I probably won't need to grow as many varieties or have as many plants this year because I have canned and frozen a lot of different tomato products, and I won't have to emphasize that. I had a sweet potato crop. I had pros and cons on it. I grew them in fabric grow bags, and I think I'm going to continue with that. I had some good luck with that, and I will continue with that, but then I'm also going to grow some in my raised beds in the standard form. So I've got lots of holes and empty spaces in my garden. It brings us to this year's garden, and I have worked out on graph paper this year's garden. This is 2021's garden, and this is what it looks like. I've got a driveway that goes right through here. Here's my main garden. Here are my 4 raised beds just to the west, and these are 3 raised beds. These are 4x8s. These are 4x8s. These are 4x10s, and these are brand new this year. So I have a few things written in here. You might have to read a few of these things upside down. But I want to focus on planning for a fall garden. And when you do lay your garden out, you have to be cognizant of, number one, your sun, the path of the sun in the sky in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall. In the spring and in the fall, the path of the sun is relatively the same. It's usually lower in the sky. This is my south end. So the sun, this part of my garden is shaded. You know, the south side, because we have a hill and the neighbor has trees, some old growth trees up top, and so they're deciduous trees. So in the summer, they're going to be leafed out, but that time the sun is more directly overhead. But in the fall, then they start losing their leaves, but still there are some conifers up there that's going to cast a shadow on the southern portion here. So I can't grow anything in this southern side because it just gets shade. So I'm not going to have any of my fall garden crops over here on this side. My fall garden crops are going to lie over here in these raised beds. And these raised beds I will be able to put row covers over, hoop houses, coal frames, and things like that are going to be able to protect my my plants and hopefully push them into as late as December, and with some of my harvesting of my produce. So sun rises in the east, sets in the west. So you want to be aware of the sun, because that's the most important thing for gardeners, is that their plants have sun in which to grow. My fall garden is going to be concentrated on this side in these raised beds. Right now, I'm going to have broccoli and Chinese cabbage in this one. Broccoli will be harvested in probably July, and then I'll have another crop ready to go in, and that will grow on through August, September, and I'll harvest probably that in October. Right now I have sweet potatoes slated in here. I'm not really sure. I have to look at my varieties of sweet potatoes and see how long that they take to mature, and if this bed then will be available for harvest, and at what time, and what I could plant in here. These beds here, I'm going to be my bean trellis, so I will take my beans out in the latter part of in August, and be able to then fill these with lettuces and carrots and things like that that will start growing early, and then I'll be able to hold them for harvest in late fall. But most everything in here will not. Here I have potatoes along this one side. Now potatoes will be harvested in the summer, and I cannot put anything else in here because it's just all shade. So most of them, this part of the garden will go dormant, maybe a few along here. This was my 2021 garden planning video. Not going to talk about the seeds yet. They'll come in the next video, and we'll talk all about seed packets and information and when to start and all sorts of good stuff like that. There's lots to think about in planning a garden. But there's one important thing I haven't talked about yet, and I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, except for the fact that possible seed shortages again this year. Last year I was very fortunate. I did order my seeds very early in January, and I didn't have a problem in getting what I wanted. But people that waited until longer had a problem in finding varieties and different types of plants that they were interested in planting. But this year, I think a lot of people have decided they are going to order early because of possible shortages. But I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that as with a lot in this pandemic, people seem to be hoarding things. Let's not have it happen with seeds either. Let's not hoard seeds. Buy one packet. Nobody needs 30 zucchini seeds. Or share them with your neighbors. I have a package of zucchini seeds that I've had for about 5 years. And I only grow one plant or two plants. And that's about it. Get together with your gardening neighbors or the neighbors who want to start gardening and mentor them and share seeds. Last summer I decided that I was going to save seeds. So I saved many of my lettuce seeds. I saved bean seeds. I saved pea seeds. I did a lot of seed saving last year. So I didn't have to buy a lot of different of the varieties that I usually use. I even saved some tomato seeds, and we're going to see how those work out. I still have lots of seeds from last year. If they were stored correctly, they should last you a good long time. So let's make this a community effort. Let's do a cooperative sharing thing so people in need don't run out of seed. Anyway, that was it for this week. I'm going to try and get out another video very soon on seeds. And if you like this and hadn't subscribed, please subscribe. If not, or always give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and share it with other people so then we can spread this knowledge around. Anyway, until the next one, I'll see you. Bye.